Here talking the Washington Commanders offseason. Let's get it on. What's up, y'all? It's George Carmen with Full Press Coverage. I'm here with my man Big Doug, host of the Big Douglas Show. How you doing today, bro?
Good. Thanks for having me on today, George.
Of course, man. It's a pleasure, man. I'm also here with Jamual Forrest, host of the Trapper Dive podcast, analyst of Hogsty and Hogshaven. How you doing today, bro? You doing all right?
Everything is well, my man. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. Of course. So, guys, what we're here to do to talk about today is kind of recapping the Washington's offseason. Right now, the Commanders are on a 6-week hiatus until they come back to training camp in late July. I just kind of want to talk to y'all about what's going on and off the field, what players you like, who you're interested in. So, let me start off with Doug, man. So, Doug, what are your reflections so far this offseason? We basically had some, pretty solid draft in my opinion. Training camps and coming through. What's your big takeaway? I'm leaving that open-ended on purpose. Do you think we're still looking good this season, or how you feeling about that?
I think it was I think they showed you they thought they're close. I think they again went out and swung big at quarterback. And for those that don't think they didn't swing big, they did. I mean, whether you like Wentz or not, he's got to be the biggest name, biggest arm available. Seeing how Garoppolo was the other one I heard a lot about. You see, he's still not available. And they'd have waited for a whole bunch of other teams. So I think they went out there and tried to solve that problem. And then, they're also last year, Curtis Samuels was another big time acquisition. He didn't play much at all. So I think they really counted on the idea that he's going to be helped. Now, whether that was smart or not, I think they counted on the fact that adding him really makes this offense explosive. And that Wentz, is the key to unlocking this thing we've been waiting on for Turner for 3 years now.
Yeah, I agree. I think what Washington tried to do was kind of bank on the diminishing returns, right? Montez Sweat was hurt Montez Sweat broke his jaw last year. Chase Young tore his ACL. Curtis Samuel was gone last year too. I think they're hoping that everyone will bounce back and contribute. So hopefully that will kind of show some progress this year. And the identity that Carson Wentz is that much better than Taylor Heineke that they should improve. Doug, before I throw it over to Jamal, are you a Carson Wentz fan? How do you feel about that?
I am. Somebody put it to me this way. It made a lot of sense to me the other day. It was one of these random, questions on Twitter. So over the last 6 or 7 years, what quarterback scared you the most when they played Washington, be it the Redskins or Washington football team? For me, it's been Carson Wentz for half a decade. And so if this guy is anywhere close to the MVP that we saw, I mean, it's unfair to say. It's fair to say he's been on 3 teams in 3 years now because it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
But new GM came to Philly, drafted a quarterback in the second round. I mean, what does that say? I mean, they were ready to move on. New head coach, new general manager. That usually happens. That shouldn't be surprising. Last year, to me, was a problem with the owner. I don't think if you could get Truth Serum to the general manager, they would have traded away a guy they just spent a whole bunch of draft picks on, even if they got a fairly good, return package.
Mm-hmm.
So I am high on him. I think he's the best quarterback we've had since Kirk Cousins, I suppose. I guess that's not saying a ton, but yeah, I mean, if they win 7 with Heineke last year, you ought to be feeling real good about what you ought to be able to do with him.
That's an interesting perspective. I never really considered who Washington should fear the most, and definitely Carson Wentz was a menace, especially during that Ryan Kerrigan era we had here in DC. I'd say Dak Prescott's probably the most threatening that we have right now. He's been kind of a beast, the past couple of years, but definitely Carson Wentz is in that conversation. Jamal, what are your impressions, man? What are you thinking? You thinking the team looking good? Big expectations? What do you think about the offseason so far?
Well, like you said, it's kind of an open-ended question, and I think it's a good thing because one of the things that you just asked about is the expectations, right?
Yep.
I think, I guess to add on to the conversation, because I don't necessarily disagree with anything, to add on to the conversation is the expectations wasn't necessarily something that fans put out there. And to be more specific, Ron Rivera put out expectations this offseason from February or March and started talking about how close they were, and all they really needed was a quarterback to kind of get the ball rolling for this team. He made his pitch at the combine, through the media, the national media, saying, "Hey man, Russell Wilson, if you're available, look, hey, come on over here. We got the mile for you. We got the pieces. All you need to do is come over here, have a little seat in Washington D.C. and we can win a couple championships or something like that." Oh, Deshaun Watson, I know. Hey, look, I know you going. This is in March. In February, Deshaun Watson, I know you know what I'm saying. I know you're going through some things in Houston. You want to get out of there. Let's go ahead and what I'm saying, make that move to Washington D.C. Like wave that clause. All these other things to these quarterbacks, and essentially just saying, that is the position that they really need. And I understood it, but I think it was short-sighted because he started naming off these stats with the offensive line, the 1,000-yard rusher, and Antonio Gibson, and all these other things. And while it, technically it's accurate, I just don't think it's the full picture. And obviously, when you're trying to make that picture, it's one thing. But when you talk about the offseason that they did to this point, grabbing Carson Wentz is probably they're playing C, maybe even playing D, who knows? But they got a competent quarterback, and that's all good. And I like the idea of Carson Wentz in his offense. That Scott Turner is a person who loves that vertical game, and he's dialed up plays as I've continued to watch him. Dialed up plays that kind of pushes that intermediate to deep level areas of the field. And Taylor Heineke wasn't necessarily that quarter. And I hate when I talk about Taylor himself because he was a backup. He was not even the starter for Washington. But in that same vein, when you saw him for a 17-game sample, you kind of know what your offense is lacking. And when you add your Jahan Dotson, you add Cole Turner, and you're hoping you get Curtis Samuel back. It's kind of looking sketchy right now, but you get Curtis Samuel, and with De'Ami Brown around, you have these pieces who can attack that all three levels of the field. Like they all do different things, but all of them combined can all attack all three levels, and they can do it really well. You're looking forward to seeing what you can do offensively and maybe turning this ship around. But the defense is also a part that you all spoke on, George and Doug, that when they say that they're content or they think that they have pieces to win, they showed it. They didn't worry about adding anything defensively except for through the draft. So they showed that they were content defensively, and that whatever happened on the defensive side of the football, and in some vein the offensive side of the football, it was all about a fluke 2021 season, and they're trying to prove this thing in 2022 to say that, look, we can do it with the pieces that we already had.
I love that, Jamal. That's a good take for real. So definitely, you guys both talked about Washington being content. People reverting back to the norm. Building up from what we had, getting that quarterback. Was that the right decision, Doug? Do you think they were prudent in actually kind of being patient and kind of waiting on that? And do you think our defense will come back to the norm? Like, do you think the defense is, was last year the outlier, or was 2020 the outlier? Like, what do you have in regard to that? Go ahead, Doug. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, last year, we forget Sweat had a lot of personal issues. A lot of times we forget, right, that they're not actually video game players, and that they're real young men. Most of them 25 and under a lot of the time. You went through a lot of things last year. The team on a whole went through a COVID, outbreak last year. Chase Young goes down early. So I don't know. They said that the communication got better at the back end of last season. Defensive played better last year. So I can see why they think they're close, because remember, that's the same defense pretty much that most of the national guys had as a top 5 defense last year. Problem was the offense was better than the defense last year, even with the backup quarterback in. So am I surprised? No, only because the staff has shown to be fairly arrogant.
I can see that. I can see that.
And that's okay. Being arrogant is not a bad thing if you're right. Being arrogant and wrong is a horrible thing, because that's what sets you back. So if they like where they're at, and I still think they'll add, a veteran middle linebacker, they'll probably add one more veteran defensive tackle. I could see, the star Latualegi is still out there. Somebody like that just comes in, gets 20 snaps a game.
Yeah, role player.
That's right. So if they're right, then it all makes a lot of sense. I think that they are closer to being right than not, but we'll see.
Okay. Interesting. Jamal, what do you think? I mean, was that kind of an arrogant strategy to kind of like, I feel like the draft was more of like plugging holes and finding specific players to basically fit a need for this team. Were you happy with the draft strategy? Did you think that like, are they, do you see their vision? Do you agree with it? Is what I'm asking.
So I like how you phrased the question. I do see their vision.
Mhm.
I understand what they were doing. And I think the question of do I agree with it or not, I actually think this should be a larger question too, like, or a response, excuse me, on my side. When we talk about if we agree with it or not, I think it's okay to have those type of opinions. But at the end
That's
of the
true.
day, you got to understand, you meaning the people that's listening, and myself included, you have to
Mhm.
understand that it doesn't matter if if we really agree with it or not.
Facts.
Like,
Facts.
if you understand what they're doing, that's one thing. If you don't understand what they're doing, that's another thing as well. But if you
Mhm.
see it, you have to just say, all right, well, you decided to sit on this side and go with it, sit on that hill and go with it. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, let's find out why this strategy didn't work. And for
Mhm.
me, I was able to see it. I like Jahan Dotson. Again, I
Mhm.
told people before, he was my fourth rated receiver in the NFL draft coming out. So, and he was, for those who were wondering about Olave, I had Olave fifth. So, like, for them to pass up on Olave at 11, I wasn't too upset at that. But in that same vein, your fourth receiver is selected, and he was probably higher rated on their board than
Mhm.
he was on mine. So, like,
Great
if you
point.
make those, if you understand that, and the same thing with Phil Mathis, a lot of people don't understand, as much as you all want to say this is not you all specifically, but as much as you all listening, or if you had those thoughts of he could have been available in the third or fourth round, well, guess what? There were also people out there in the NFL who legitimately had him on their first draft
Yeah, first
grades. Like,
board.
they had that out there. It was legit. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't make believe. So if you thought that he was going to last until the fourth or fifth round, maybe even late third, guess what? Washington did a good job taking him where they took him. So you just have to understand those things. And if you see their vision, if you understand the player too, you have to watch the player. Don't worry about where they drafted them. Watch them. You see what these kind of guys do for your team. And I think the first three draft picks in Phil, Brian Robinson, and obviously Jahan Dotson, those are going to be your guys who contributes the most. And you have to hope that those three, at the very least, pan out. And everybody after them kind of hope, that they actually contribute to some degree. So, Dakota. Oh my God. Can you all still hear me?
Guest appearance. Yeah, I got you, man. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, all right. Now I was just making sure. She's over here messing with my cords and stuff. So
Nah,
yeah,
you're good, bro.
I'll end it there. But yeah, I just think that you have to understand their vision. If you agree with it or not, that doesn't matter. But if you see it, you just have to let them rock and see why it doesn't work, or why it does work.
No, that's a fantastic answer, man. Like, I definitely think that all of us are into this, right? We're passionate into the Commanders. That's why we have these podcasts and writing these articles and get into them. But at the same time, they're there 24/7. They're professionals. They got a job to do in regard to like talent scouting and the game plan and things like that. I think the one benefit is there is a clear vision. They did want to build the offense and build around Carson Wentz. So I do like seeing that whole perspective and that growth right there. I do like Jahan Dotson. I think they had him higher rated than what the fans thought in regard to his stats. He's very pro ready. He's walking in and kind of eating up in camp right now. So I'm looking forward to that. So we'll kind of see how everything plays out. Big Doug, like before we move on to Terry McLaurin, I'm going to talk about him in a second. How do you feel about the draft? Is there anyone that stands out to you in particular that you like? Are you happy with Dotson, or do you wish we went in a different direction? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I like Dotson. Real quick, I want to comment on what Marl said though, because he's right, and I don't think we get it sometimes. Like, they're not just in there looking at a board that they made up on draft day.
Mm-hmm.
And they're working phones, finding out who's taking. Like, hey, you like this guy? What's going on here? You heard about this guy? Who likes him? Who else likes him? Where's he going to go? Last year, I remember them saying, they were surprised Cosme made it that far. They
Mm-hmm.
thought he was going to go a full round earlier. They didn't think Diami Brown would be that far. That they had heard he was going soon. So it's like when we just assume that we're the only one that have like guys rated there, the league knows and they talk about it. And a lot of the times, just because your favorite mock drafter doesn't have them there, doesn't mean that the rest of the league isn't kind of on the same page that Washington's at. I mean, I know we think that that's how these things work, right? That everybody's in a mock draft land. Just not there. And imagine losing on a guy because he goes 7 spots later. Like, I say this all the time about Dotson, right? if the Packers take him 4 picks later, it's a home run smash pick.
Dude, crushing it. Yeah, exactly.
Him and it's like, yeah, but you could have had him 4 picks later. Well, okay, we didn't pick 4 picks later. We have him here, so we're taking him here. So listen, I love the pick.
And that was me drafting like too, Doug. I was like, you could have traded back a little bit later. And then after I settled down and did some more digging, I was like, you know what? If you take him at 16 or whatever spot we was, I was like, if you take him there, okay, cool. So I'm with you. I 100% agree. I was that person that could have took him later on, but
and the day after the draft, Logan Paulson comes on and he reminds me this too. You're not comparing like Jameson Williams, who you could have had there, to Jahan Dotson. You're comparing him to Jahan Dotson and the 3 other players that you picked with Jahan Dotson.
That's true. It's a package.
Get Robinson if you don't make that trade. As far as the players that they did take, listen, I saw somebody do the breakdown on the rushing attempts last year, and there were a lot of attempts and snaps for running backs not named Antonio Gibson last year. So there'll be a big role for Brian Robinson this year, and is it because they're not going to? Maybe this regime doesn't pay running backs 2 contracts. We don't know that. Maybe it's because Antonio Gibson's been dinged each of the last 2 years. Now, I give him credit for playing all those games. And again, the same thing with Mathis. They had an idea of what they wanted in a defensive tackle. And it's why, for all those that were really pissed that Settle's not on the team anymore, Settle didn't do what they wanted from that position. They wanted a guy that was going to eat up tackles. And let's not forget, while he was eating up tackles in the SEC last year, Phil Mathis got, 8 sacks? So, luckily productive is something that, is not something that is charted, but is very important.
No, I agree. I think all the picks are pretty solid. I think that coming back and turning from 11 to 16 and acquiring the 3rd and 4th round pick, that was awesome. It definitely kind of softened the blow with the Carson Wentz trade. So, we gave away a 3rd to basically get Carson Wentz. We got one back and we got Brian Robinson. And I actually like him a lot. I actually did some studying for him, and I agree. I think he's going to play a major role. I think it also lights the fire under Antonio Gibson, who I like. I like him as a player, but maybe he isn't a bell cow running back. Maybe it is kind of good to split shares and kind of extend his career a little bit right there too. So I'm excited about that. So altogether, I do think it was a good draft. Also, kind of bringing up both of your points, we're all intelligent guys. We study, we research and things like that. But those scouts are there all year long. It's not like a 2-month process in regard to finding players and kind of finding what they're good at. They do it all year long. They're road warriors. They're out in their cars kind of watching these different practices every single time. So these national guys like Todd McShay and Mel Kiper, I doubt they're putting in the work that the scouts are. So that's where that discrepancy is between the draft boards and the scouts, in my opinion. So we gotta trust the vision, see how it goes, and see how it plays out.
George, trusting the vision. Also, we've been talking about that a lot on this podcast.
Yep.
That also has a lot to do with their faith in last year's draft class.
Interesting. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like Derek Forrest is a guy they're really high on that, and maybe that's why you're not seeing Buffalo Nickel worried about so much. So I think a lot of what they did this year is a reflection on how much they like the growth and development of the guys they drafted last year.
And I agree. And just one more thing to chime in. It was interesting. I don't know if you guys heard the latest John Keim podcast, but Carson Wentz. Oh, sorry, it was the Washington Football Talk one. And Carson Wentz interviewed with JP Finley and all those guys. And he was saying that it was shocking to walk into a locker room and being the oldest person in the room. If you think about it, Washington's a fairly young team. They're all like 21, 22, 23 years old. He said he's walking into 30 years old, and he's like, it's a different perspective. It's like, I have to be the leader now. And that was his knock. His knock is that he might not be a natural born leader, or maybe he'll kind of feel that role as a veteran on 3 teams. So that is interesting. And I do think the team, you mentioned it as arrogance. I think they kind of are confident in themselves in coaching. If you ever notice, they would always err to the side of a younger player because they feel they can coach those traits up. So it's going to be interesting in year 3, seeing these like Percy Butlers and Derek Forrest and Jamin Davises, and see if they can actually grow with the coaching of these guys. And I hope to see some good things here. So we'll see how that goes. All right, let's pivot a little bit. So there was a notable absence last week, huge absence. Number 17, our captain, Terry McLaurin. Jamual, how do you feel about this? Are you worried about him not being at mandatory training camp? Do you think a deal is going to get signed with him? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, throughout this point, June 20th, throughout this point of the offseason, I was always confused with the idea of Terry showing up when I think he showed up to the all-season workouts at first, but he just didn't work out with the team. And all I said throughout the entire time, I said, if you're gonna hold out, why are you showing
I'm
up
with
at
you.
all? Like,
I'm with you.
don't half-ass it. Just do it. Just hold
I'm
out.
with
Don't
you.
show up to anything. Don't do anything. Make that statement known. And for him to and I gotta full circle this, but for him to not show up at minicamp, I understood it and I appreciated that because there was no more tiptoeing the lines. Like, you can't tiptoe the lines and show the team that, sure, I am that teammate that wants to be here for my team and my coaches and show my face and understand that I am committed to this side. And then also, like, oh, by the way, I want my money. So if you all don't mind, can you please pay me? No, like, I need my money. You need to stay on that one side. Give me my bread type of deal. So for me, with Terry, to push forward to August and training camp, I think that's going to be a signal if he doesn't show up, and also if there is not a deal done prior to training camp even starting. I think that's kind of some things that you have to worry about. I mean, if there's no deal in training camp, that's one thing. But if you don't completely show up at all, then you kind of understand like the direction in which this could possibly be going for the Washington Commanders and Terry. I think it's going to be in their best interest, obviously, for them to have this deal done before training camp because you want to make sure that me and Terry and Carson Wentz are able to work on the field together and actually establish something, because just talking through text message and phone calls or whatever they're doing right now ain't gonna cut it.
I agree.
Terry and Jamual don't even speak right now, but Terry and Carson does. But they're not on the field necessarily working out together. So I just think it's going to be interesting moving forward. I think that a deal needs to be done prior to camp. But if you're not seeing anything at all before the season starts, you're looking at a situation like Brandon Sheriff. You're looking at a situation like Kirk Cousins in terms of playing the tag game. So you either pony up now or have to deal with this whole thing for another at least 2 years, because you're going to tag them, and then you may have to either trade them or you may have to either tag them again if you don't have that money already in his hand. So no, or even let him walk. I'm sorry, or even let him walk. But you don't want to do that because he's too valuable of an asset just to let him go for free.
You nailed it, bro. I'm right there with you. So I love that point. Basically, minicamp was 3 days in the middle of June. If he does not come to those 3 days, he has a nice 6-week vacation until training camp. What's the point of even coming for 3 days, right? So realistically, I didn't see him even coming to minicamp at all. But people were kind of getting anxious about it and bringing it up. But I think it was a good move. It also was a little like red flag for his. It was a marketing point for his agent. Hey, we're playing ball, man. We're not going to come. We're not going to come. And basically, it's really interesting. It's really important for us to get this contract done. I agree, Jamal. If he doesn't come to training camp, that's going to be more of a red flag. It might become more toxic. And Doug, I'm going to throw it over to you in a second. I'm going to ask you kind of a weird question and go back to Terry again. Would it be smart at all to even go down that route with Terry McLaurin with the whole tag game? Because if I look at the tag, I believe it's like 21, 22 million. That's going to be cheaper than his actual salary. Would you do that, or is that a bad just bad show of hand for the team? What do you think?
Well, you talk about show of hands. I'll put it like this. Players that win a ton of money in poker make their money off bad hands. Everybody wins with 2 aces. So what I mean by that with Terry is it's easiest to get a deal done for the fans, for everybody involved. But that doesn't mean that. So in 3 years, Terry's 30.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is an interesting thing, and I forget who did the math on it, but it was kind of when they were doing the Sheriff stuff. That thing they did with Sheriff with the contract in the 2 years, I mean, that was a great deal all around for the franchise. And then he walks and they'll get the comp pick, and everybody got paid well. Terry for 2 years at around $23 million is a steal. And then you get the comp pick, and you assumingly are drafting wide receivers all along.
In the meantime,
they may just be under the camp. We're not paying receivers $25 million. It's not the business we're into. I'd be curious to know how shocked Ron was that the receiver market took off before they were able to get a deal done, right? Like maybe they weren't quite worried about the deal because nobody was getting these kind of deals. And then you got Christian Kirk, and then you've got Tyreek Hill, and then you've got Hollywood Brown and A.J. Brown, and all of a sudden, decent receivers are getting first-round compensations and $25 million, and maybe it made the front office say, oh, wait a minute now, that's not really what we want to do. So I think they'll get Terry paid. I think Allen, if I'm not wrong, got done at the end of July last year, right before camp. That seems to be their way of doing things around here, even back to Bruce Allen. Maybe this is when the TV money goes in for Snyder is in July. I don't know that, but maybe that's the reason why he tends to like these things to happen.
Yeah.
So I guess a long-winded answer to your question is I think he'll get paid. People would be mad, upset, but I can see a way where they didn't. They played the franchise tag game and everybody wins. And Terry still gets a big contract from somebody else in 3 years. Now, that's putting a lot of pressure on your fans to go through that every year.
That's true.
And the front office, we know well about that. So I think he gets paid, but I can see a way where both sides win by not paying him.
That's interesting. To put some, Jamal, I'll go back to you in a second, but basically to put a little stamp on it, right? So John Allen signed July 26th, the day before training camp last year. That was kind of his thing. I love the conversation you brought up. I'm going to throw it to Jamal in a second about this. So it's going to be an interesting year next year, right? We definitely look I think we had like 4 or 5. I think there are maybe 5 or 6 first-round wide receivers this year in the draft class. And now we're starting to get into a crossroads in the NFL. It's like, do you pay these big market wide receivers and pay them $25 million? Or do you start looking at rookies and kind of relying on them because the wide receiving class are starting to come out more and more every single year, basically more prepared. We saw Justin Jefferson, we saw Jamar Chase. We're starting to see those guys. And I wonder if they're the outliers or they're the norm moving forward. So I'm going to ask you that in a second, Jamal. Well, I'll ask you that right now. What do you think, Jamal? Do you think you should pay Terry, or do you think following the whole rookie class is the way to go?
Well, I think that's a
hard question. Sorry, put it
no, you're good. I think it's a twofold question. Like, so first off, I'll pay Terry. I think I would pay Terry. I was at the 23 number. What is it, June? I was at the 23 number, like right before free agency started. Because I remember what changed was the Christian Kirk deal, and I didn't know what that meant for the market. I wasn't that fast on the cap stuff, but I was around 23 before Christian Kirk got signed, and I was like, I mean, that's gonna be a comfortable number, but then you take into account all these other deals, and I think Doug brought up a great point. Like, what is the cap for the front office? Like, what are they saying is not necessarily a good deal for them? And again, this goes back to their vision or their principle when it comes to money now, not necessarily a draft board. What's their principle? And if you understand their principle, it's not about Terry anymore. It's about running a successful team. And do you agree, whether or not you agree that you have to pay a certain player X amount of dollars to keep him just because he means so much to your franchise, or I'm not going to pay this position this amount of dollars because that's what we believe in. And I think that's kind of going to be the crux of this thing. And the second part of this thing is like, remember back in like 2014, 2015, this was the same conversation with running backs. Like the Todd Gurley's that came out, Trent Richardson came out, Zeke Elliott, all these things. Like this was a conversation about running backs and when their deals came out. Now, not Trent Richardson because that was secondary, but Todd Gurley got a second deal with the Rams. He fell off, I think, that same year. That same year he got the deal or something like that. Zeke Elliott got a second contract. Melvin Gordon was in contract talks at one point. Like it was a ton of top running backs at one period who you're saying you're not paying and you're not even taking running backs as high as they did. Like some were getting picked in the top 10, top 5. And I think that's kind of the conversation here too. Like, do you pay a running back a certain amount of money when the shelf life is around 3 years in the NFL? Like, that's kind of where you're at with receivers too. Like, do you win with receivers, or can you win, or is it more beneficial to maximize like a receiver when they're on their rookie deal? Because when you get past that 4 years or that 5 years, now you're talking about, well, do you want to pay him X amount of % of the cap? I mean, or your cap or something like
longevity.
That. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily work out. Julio Jones was probably one of the few who really even made it to the Super Bowl after he got paid, I think. And y'all can help me out with some ones that come off the top of your head, but you rarely see teams make it further than, a playoff win, maybe even a Super Bowl with quarterbacks that's on their second deals or their biggest deals, or even receivers in that same thing.
That's true. It's kind of, regard like salary cap allotment. It is kind of smart to build your team in the right kind of vision, right? If you kind of spend too much money in one end, you're gonna have a deficit somewhere else. So I definitely see where you're coming from there. I think the
And
last thing
Devontae Adams too. My bad. I just that's the one. That's the
Yeah,
second
I
one
was
that popped
thinking,
in my
I was
head.
thinking about
They
Devontae.
traded him.
Yeah,
and think
exactly
about
right.
the Steelers, who draft a receiver pretty much every year in the first 3 rounds.
Wide receiver factory, man. They're always killing it out there. I guess the one thing on Terry before we move on is I know there's been talk. Like Ron Rivera had a presser the other day. He was talking about the importance of signing Terry McLaurin, and he kind of alluded to the fact that, like, there's a narrative around DC. I don't know how true it is, but people don't want to be here, don't want to stay here or sign here. They want to kind of prove that they signed Terry McLaurin long term, that and he continues to thrive. That's like that benchmark. We are a factor. We are building our team up, and we do want players that want to be around here with McKissick and now McLaurin and things like that. So I think that's in the back of their mind. But I do think the wide receiver market is going to get better as the rookies come on. But I think Terry McLaurin is an exception. I think coming in, what's up, Roger? I see you over there. I think coming in, basically, Terry McLaurin is the face of the franchise, captain, leader, does things the right way. If you don't sign him, I think it's a bad message for the rest of the team, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I'm looking at.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think it is going to be a bad message, but look, if you stand tall on your principle, and I'm not saying this is the actual case, but I just agree with Doug too. Like, if that principle does exist for them, and if they stand tall on it, I respect it. But Terry McLaurin is going to be that's a rough example to start with.
It's a rough example to start. I agree, and honestly, like, to be straight up, like, it'd be more prudent for him to go somewhere. Like, I love Terry McLaurin, I love him here in DC, but if he like goes to the Chiefs or like the Packers, like to the Broncos, if he just goes to a team with a legit elite quarterback, he's gonna blow up. He's a good all around wide receiver. So Washington needs to keep him here. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's do one more question on the field and a couple off the field. So last question about training camp. I throw it to Doug. Let's talk about player and position, right? What is one player that you're really excited about? It could be a rookie, could be a returning player that you're excited about this year. And what's a deficit that you're worried about moving forward with their team?
Well, I'm excited to see Curtis Samuels be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple. Let me cheat here on you, George.
Cool. Go ahead, bro. That's all good.
I'm excited because we just didn't get to see him much, and I know what the offense looks like when he's healthy. I think I know what the plan is when they got him moving all over the field. Mm-hmm. A player I think is going to have a really big jump this year is Cosme.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Cosme's in for a really big year. You could see him getting better as the season went on, and I frankly don't think if there's a difference between Sheriff and Trey Turner, it's not big enough that I think it will squash his development.
Interesting. Okay.
And then just finally, my personal favorite, who I just am higher on than most, is Bates. I think Bates is in for a huge year. I think Thomas is probably looking at the pup list for the first 4, so he starts out as QB1. Very excited to see what he can do this year.
There you go. I like that, man. Bates, I think the whole tight end group's going to be interesting altogether, right? I'm really excited about Cole Turner personally. I'm excited about him, but definitely Cosme coming back, Bates would be pretty solid. And then I guess we didn't finish it off, Doug. What are you worried about? You said you like those players. Is there a position group you're worried about?
Not really.
Okay.
I think it's interesting. I mean, maybe the tight end room, just because outside of Thomas, it really is it's a bunch of rookies and Bates, right? Cool. So, I mean, you're not really sure what's there. But I like the room, and I'm higher on it than probably most are. But if I had to pick one, that's it, because I think the receiver room is loaded. The running back room.
I'm excited about the receiver room.
And the offensive line was good last year. I don't see why it wouldn't be good again this year. So.
It's true. Before I go over to Maul, shout out to East Coast Gridiron and Roger Smith. We see you guys in the chat. We appreciate it, man. Thank you, guys. Let's see what Roger. He's jumping on again. Roger says this offense is going to be totally different than last year's. I agree, bro. I'm totally agree. So Jamual, man, what's up with you, man? What's one player you're really excited about? What's one what's one deficit you see for the team?
Okay. So I think one person I'm really excited about. You mentioned Cole Turner, so I will let you have that one, man. I'm not going to speak on Cole, but I will speak on Fedarian Mathis. I think one of the things that people, and this is rough because like you all spoke on it. We all spoke on it like slightly early on when we talked about the draft picks. But when people look at players, like I remember when when he was selected, they said, why didn't Washington, if they want to take defensive line, why didn't they take the guy from Oklahoma? I forgot his name now, but
Yeah, me too.
why didn't they take this guy from Oklahoma? And Oklahoma dude was a 3-tech, but he was only like 290 pounds, 285 pounds. And I'm sitting here thinking, you got a guy for Darian Mathis who is 3
Monster.
something, 6'5", and he moves like a damn linebacker. Like he is the guy that you would want. Somebody who moves as good as Darian Mathis, in that size, who has that strength to anchor down, take on double teams, also has the ability to stack and shed. Like his long arm is incredible. He has good vision in the backfield, like all of these things, and he's a selfless player, and I love that about him. And I think one of the things that people just overlooked is they're taking on the idea of Tim Settle leaving, Matt Ioannidis walking, and not keeping those guys. And you have to understand what Darian Mathis brings to a team. He's going to allow Jamin Davis, he's going to allow Cole Holcomb to flourish, and anybody else on that back end who needs to make plays in those gaps, those interior offensive line gaps, or even the outside the tackles, he's going to allow them to win. And I think that's what people are going to start seeing as the season goes on, and people start doing live film study as the season goes along, which is what I'll be doing. This is the purpose of a Darian Mathis. So I'm excited to see him. And I'm excited to see what I saw in Alabama, see if it translates to the next level, because Jamin Davis, if this does work out, Jamin Davis second year, his season will be tremendously different than the season that you had in 2021. So I'm looking forward to it. That's my positive, my concern. Shoot.
Here, I'll give you some time. So real quick, Fadarius Mathis is 6'4", 312. So I like that. He's a big boy. So that's definitely improved. Yeah. I like that a lot. Go ahead.
I think in that same vein, the concern is the entire defensive unit. Like you're lacking depth, at least on the back end, in terms of your second level and your third level, your linebackers, your cornerbacks and safeties. Like there's a difference when people say lacking depth. That's one thing. Like you can have bodies there, but that doesn't mean the bodies are proven. Like you have plenty of people there, but they're like none of these people are proven. So I think that's kind of the difference between when you lack depth versus understanding like you have bodies. And I just think that this back end, the linebackers and the secondary and in general, you just don't really have enough people there yet that's even proven enough to do something. And with William Jackson III, what I'm hearing in OTAs and mini camps alone, if you're not look, man, if you're not understanding the principles, the zone principles, and the cover 4 defense, or cover 4 as a boundary corner, then you are going to continue. Like it's mini camp, bro, and you've been in the league for what, 5-6 years now. Like if you're not understanding these things, even if you are a man corner, that's still a problem, because there's still, even within a zone concept, there are man principles, especially if you're a boundary side. So like that's a problem. And that's where I'm at, man. That depth, and also to be more specific, William Jackson III, your star corner in terms of financial, your star corner is struggling, and we're gonna have some issues.
I'm with you. That's why I like having Jamual on here, man. He's smart. So I heard the same thing, man. Same thing. So for one, Roger, you're correct. You and Roger, Jamual on the same page. Getting Fadarian to do a 5-2-4 defensive line. I like that. Kind of free up the linebackers. It's a good thought right there. I also agree, man. I've heard some things about William Jackson the third as well. I heard he's struggling with picking up concepts. And actually, Logan Paulson broke it down. He was like, he said he was disappointed with basically watching William Jackson over the past, during training camp during the offseason. And he mentioned his technique more so. He said, you know what, like a true cornerback can basically leverage the wide receiver to go a certain direction, force him to the boundary or corral him inside if the safety help. And he's like, William Jackson is like, he lines up on him, he's face up. He basically allows the wide receiver to go any direction because he's forward facing, as opposed to, shuffling him off right there. So I don't know what's going on with William Jackson. Hopefully he connects, but it doesn't seem like a good marriage right now in DC, but hopefully he'll have a good season. We'll see. Let's see what Roger says. Roger says Penn will benefit the most out of this 5-2. He'll have an all-pro year, and unfortunately, he'll be lost in free agency. So let's do this.
Hold on. Oh
Go ahead,
yeah,
bro.
Payne. Okay. No. I was listening to Roger.
Oh,
That's
you
all.
thought it
I was
was
like,
Mathis?
hold on, we can't. Yeah, I thought it was Mathis. I was like, hold on, bro. We can't do that about Mathis.
That'd be
Look, I
dope.
ain't
Man.
got.
I
I
would
don't think
love
he's
that, but I
wrong
don't
about
see it
that.
happening either. I don't see it. So, real quick, before we move on, I got one more question. Before we go to offseason, speaking of Payne, do you want him back? Real quick, Doug and then Jamal. Do you think we should bring him back? What do you think?
Well, you brought up team building philosophy earlier, and
It's true.
do I want him back? Absolutely. I don't think he's come close to reaching his potential.
I like Payne.
But you've got Sweat. You've already paid Allen. I mean, I don't. If they want to pay Young in a couple of years, like I'm just not sure you can give upwards of $20 million to 4 different defensive linemen. So the question is, do I want him back? Yes, absolutely. If the question is, do I think he'll be back? I find it unlikely at best.
I agree. And I'm a Montez Sweat stan. I love Montez Sweat a lot. I definitely want to bring him back. I think he can be just as good as Chase Young, if not better. So, in my opinion, I want to keep those edge rushers more so than defensive linemen. But that's just me. Jamal, what are you thinking about Payne and coming back?
So for me, same thing. Do I want him back? Yes. Do I think he'll be back? Possibly. And my answer before this weekend started was no. But somebody brought something to my attention within either the last couple of days. Carson Wentz is still like he paid. He's done after this year. Like they're paying $28 million to him this year, and there's nothing else guaranteed to him in the next couple of years. He's on a 3-year deal here in Washington, so to speak. So in that same vein, when you're talking about Deron Payne, yes, you have all these other guys on the defensive line to pay, but if you can get Deron on a 2 to 3 year deal, if he wants to stay, like obviously that's going to be have something worked out between him and his agent. I mean, the agent and the team, but you get him on a 2 to 3 year extension if he wants to stay in Washington. There's nothing to stop him on a 2 to 3 year deal. That's all on preference at that point. But I say possibly because of those options. If you don't have Carson Wentz eating up such a large deal, even if you restructure to a degree, it can work. So if they want Deron Payne back, it can work. And you just let him go when it's time to sign Chase Young, extend Chase Young. He can walk at that point. And just keep it pushing. But you technically they can keep him, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility anymore. After hearing, I forgot who I heard say it, but it's options.
Yeah, I heard that too. I actually heard that too. It's a good point. Basically, Carson Wentz says, all his money is already guaranteed. They can extend it into a long-term deal and kind of give him some guaranteed bonuses and pushes, lesser than the salary cap. So they could re-sign Deron Payne. That would be interesting because he's still pretty young. And I agree. I don't think he's reached his potential yet. So I do like that. All right, let's kind of pivot a little bit. It's a lob question. You guys can roll with it. If you guys don't like, we can move it on. Doug, on the 22nd, the House Oversight Committee is looking at Dan Snyder, kind of looking at, conduct detrimental to the team in regard to NDAs and basically, like from what I read, basically, Washington has been notorious about giving non-disclosure agreements and basically having a pretty toxic work environment. Let's talk about this, right? Do you think there's anything going to happen to Dan Snyder? Do you think he's going to be the law? Like, should Washington fans be curious or excited that Dan Snyder will possibly be removed, or you don't see anything happening anytime soon?
I don't see anything happening anytime soon. I always say it like this: every week we see something about Washington. It feels like, but keep an eye on all the other teams. There's been like 3 different owners in the news over the last 4 or 5 months, and
I agree.
Those guys have all the same skeletons, maybe dressed up in a different outfit. You know what I mean? They may not all be the same, but they're all things that would be looked poorly upon. So none of those guys are in a big hurry to set the bar for where one loses his organization from. So he's not going to testify unless they subpoena him. They're not going to kick him out unless it's just nasty, nasty stuff. Not that this stuff isn't nasty, don't get me wrong, but it's got to be nasty to, through him. And I don't think that they're ever going to get there, and they're certainly not going to get him to admit to it. So if you're getting your hopes up, we've played this game for 5 years now. I just, I quit playing the game.
Now I'm with you. I definitely think that, Dan Snyder, I don't think how much I think sometimes I wonder if the team is in a vacuum, right? We start to see the media and keep talking about Dan Snyder over and over again. Jim Irsay has some skeletons in his closet. Jerry Jones does as well. So I wonder if we just kind of see one perspective of him. I'm not saying he's a saint by any means, but it does seem like the owners are kind of in that old boy club where they kind of all like, they got some things going on. Everyone has some things going on. Jamal, anything additive at all, or go to the next question? What do you think?
I'll be quick, because I'm basically in agreement with Doug. His money quote was, "We've been playing this game for like the last 5 years, and I've quit playing the game." I'm in that same boat. Like I've never been too invested in the situation because it's like in that same vein, there's nothing that really come out of anything. Like there's no conclusions for majority of the information that's come out over these years, this time span. But in that same vein, like I just feel bad for the people, and I'm not saying like your emotions aren't warranted towards the situations, because I mean people invest so much money and time into the team, like you have a right to feel this way. But I just feel bad for the people who've been so invested into the outing of Dan Snyder, because it's like when you're looking, I'm just be honest, when you're grasping for straws, you're grasping for anything that kind of is the nail in the coffin, and without even giving something due justice. And that has nothing to do with any one thing in particular. It's just the culmination of everything. Like you have to just understand that the totality of it. And I think it's much larger than Dan Snyder when it comes to the things that goes on in the NFL. But because we know what Dan Snyder's history has been in Washington for over 23, 24 years, we know the situation closer than the national side or even Congress and things like that. So we know that we're hoping that this is the one because of all the other things in the past. But in totality, it's just another owner. Does the same thing that everybody else do.
All right. So speaking of which, I'm glad Doug's on here for this question. I tailored it specifically to you, Doug. What are your thoughts on Dan Snyder and this whole stadium, man? So this whole stadium issue, because I know you've been having a lot of interviews and talking to, I think, Michael Phillips about it, right? So I want to hear what you got.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm invested in it because my family still lives in Woodbridge. So that was exciting to me to get it that close. It says to me that incredible. Nobody wants to do business with Dan. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Because despite what politicians say, like I heard one guy say, well, we'd rather have a expansion team come in. Well, other than Dan Snyder, it is an expansion team, right? I mean, other than the colors, uniforms change, names change. They're hoping to change venue and location. So this is as close as you get to an expansion team, minus the fact that the owner is in place. So this says to me everything you need to know about Dan. Nobody wants to do business with Dan. They started off offering him money. And then when you realize that nobody else is, I mean, you're not going to bid against yourself. So when nobody else was offering, you see these numbers slowly declining. I think it still eventually ends up in Woodbridge. But boy, if it's not, it looks like they're just staying where they are.
FedEx 2.0. Jamal, what do you got, bro?
I'm not going. I don't have much to say on this one either. But I say FedEx 2.0, man. I would just, if there's one thing I have to push, it's just that y'all need to give, y'all meaning everybody involved with this stadium deal, y'all need to give FedEx and Landover another opportunity, because after understanding everything that has come across since this whole stadium deal has started to come to a head, you come to know that they never respected the land, PG County and Landover in the first place. They were just looking for a spot to put the stadium, and you never invested around the stadium. You never really cared about the neighborhoods, the communities. You never really wanted to build up the development in this area. But guess what? PG County is doing that now, and I'm proud of it. I've been in PG County ever since I was born. And I need people to understand who come here from out of the area, who loves the trash about Landover, which was valid up until the point that you understand that they've been creating changes. It was not necessarily 100% valid. There were still inequities in the area, but valid in the sense of the stadium context, the context of the stadium. But now you understand what they're doing in the area, the money that they're putting into this area. Give FedEx and Landover another opportunity. I'm all for FedEx 2.0, and having people's opinions change. So I'm here for it.
Now I'm with you, man. So Jamal, I don't know if you know this, I'm a Maryland guy myself. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm rooting for FedEx 2.0 as well because I'm from the area. I've been going to PG County my entire life. I'm a teacher in the area as well, and it's like, man, I saw that. I saw the neighborhood. I saw the false promises going to that area, and I don't like the fact how people have been criticizing PG County and putting it down for so long. I do want a fair opportunity to kind of have it built up and to celebrate it, right? And Jason
Yeah.
Wright talked about having investing in the community and investing in diversity and things like that. If that's true to say, you're not going to pull up and just leave an empty stadium in PG County. So I don't really like that per se. So I do want them to invest in the area and kind of build it up. That'd be great. I know a lot of people are kind of complaining that it's too far away from DC, but I mean it's a highway right there. It's pretty easy to get on. There's a metro
It's
right
right
there as
down the
well.
street. Central
I would
Avenue take you in the city. It's a
that
it's a
I
10
don't.
it's a 10-15 minute drive from the stadium to DC. Like
That's all.
straight shot, bro. Straight
Jamal, I'm
shot.
telling you, I think people kind of criticize they don't live around the area. It's actually pretty close. Whenever
Yes.
I pull out, and it's like, boom, I'm on 495. I'm gone right on my way home. It's pretty easy to come back. It's not that difficult, but we'll see how it all plays out. But we'll see.
I'm with
All
you.
right, last few questions, and we're almost done. So let's go back to football again, right? There's been a lot of offseason talking about the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants. In your opinion, what's the biggest threat to the Washington Commanders this season? Doug, start off with you. What do you got? Who's the biggest threat?
I actually like the division as a whole, and I think that the worst team is the Giants. Giants fans are probably thinking with the new offense they got something cooking up there. Now I disagree, but I think it's probably still the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And I actually like what the Eagles have done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those three teams are on a much even playing field than they were last year. Let's put it that way. I think those three teams will all be competing for the division title at the end of the season again. So I wouldn't have any of those three teams ranked higher than the other one. Maybe Dallas, just if you're a Dak Prescott believer and he's healthy again this year. I don't think he was actually healthy last year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the order I got him ranked in. And George, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I got to pop off, man. I'm getting ready to do my podcast here in a couple of minutes. I got to jump off.
No doubt, man. We're about to wrap it up anyway. But yeah, Doug, if you got to go, it's all good, bro.
Thank you, fellas, for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, see you, man.
All right, Doug.
All right, Jamal, last question for you, then we can wrap it up too. So what are you thinking, Jamal?
Hey, I'm in that same
Thanks, Doug.
boat. Well, Doug said he likes what the Eagles have done. I love it. I ain't gonna lie to you. Look, last year was different. Like when you look at the Cowboys and you say, they only beat teams, with losing records and things like that. That is factual. And when you look at the Eagles, they've only beaten teams with losing records and things like that. That is factual. But guess what happens? What's the difference between what the Cowboys did and the Eagles did this offseason? The Eagles understood where they stand currently or when the season ended. They didn't have a lot of pieces. They didn't have a lot of versatility offensively. They also didn't have a ton of help in the secondary defensively on that side of the ball. So what do? They get A.J. Brown. They trade for A.J. Brown to go along with Devontae Smith. They try to help out Jalen Hurts and his prove it year, quote unquote, for the Eagles. And then on defensively, you get Bradbury from the Giants, and then you get Jordan Davis up front, and you get
Kazir White, right?
The linebacker from Georgia.
Kobe Dean.
Nakobe Dean.
Yeah.
You get these guys to fill out all three levels of your defense. Your attacking success, like that phrase is true and is accurate when it comes to Jaworski Tart from the Niners, what Roger Smith said. So like when you the phrase attacking success exists and is relevant when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. I love what they did because they understood, again, you weren't really necessarily a threat to the bigger and better teams in the NFC or even in the AFC when it comes to winning records and stuff like that, or even competent teams. But guess what? You did yourself a huge favor by bringing in bigger pieces to compete and try to continue building on what was a mixed result of 2021. So I'm all for it. I think they're the number one team. I think Dallas is number two. Washington's number three, rightfully so. Up until the season starts, they have to kind of prove that they can overcome both Dallas and Philly, two huge issues in terms of being able to run the ball effectively and maintain possession. Washington couldn't really do anything against either one of those teams. On either side, on one side of the ball, if not both. So that's kind of where I'm at. Giants is whatever. I think we're gonna sweep them.
I like it, man. That's a good perspective. I think you're right. The Eagles built up holistically, even if Jalen Hurts isn't the answer. Actually, I kind of like Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's like a dominant quarterback. He's a great fantasy quarterback. He's definitely going to run the ball and score some touchdowns that way. But we'll see how that goes in regard to like overall talent. I do think the Eagles are definitely pretty solid. And I think 2 wild card teams will come out of the NFC East. It's going to be between the Cowboys, Eagles, and the Commanders. We just got to see who's more healthy there. So last question, Jamal, and we'll wrap it all up. Is Washington a playoff team this year? What do you think, bro?
Hey, so look, I got something. Look, the short answer is yes. But here's how I base, and I'll tell people this every time somebody asks me this question. It's the same thing of what do you think they're going to do this season type of thing. And it's all based on Ron's expectations. Like, you set the tone for this season. You said that you will have to win now. You said that this year 3 is a pivotal season for your team and the Commanders. So if you're saying all that, all right, well, let me rock with your expectations. I'm going to sit here and tell everybody who asked me this question, because I do more than halfway. Like, I'm probably like 70% on his side anyway. But if you're going to sit here and say all these things, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and get to this playoffs. I think at minimum, this is a 9-win team. And we'll see where it goes from there. Anything under that, I'm not going to sit here and say I'll be completely surprised, but I will be disappointed given the fact that, you know, the campaign this year was all about we're just a quarterback away, essentially. So let's go ahead and see what Rivera is talking about, what the staff is talking about. I think that this is a playoff team.
Now I'm with you, man. I think a floor for 9 wins is reasonable. I'd like 10 wins. Anything below 9, I think, would be a disappointment for us. I think there has been a lot of buildup for Washington. And Roger, I see, man. I think so, barring injuries, there'll be a playoff team. And Roger, thanks, man. You've been blowing up the chat all day, man. I appreciate that for real. So, so we're gonna bring it on home. So first of all, Jamal, man, thank you for everything. Great insight. I really appreciate you, bro. Tell us where they can find you on social media and what are you working on?
So first and foremost, Joy, man, I appreciate you having me on. This was a pleasure, man. And as you know, like I almost couldn't do it because of these people, you know, that we talked about before we got on. So, I appreciate you having me on, man. You can find me at Let Maul Tell It, MUAL for those who don't know how to spell my name. At Let Maul Tell It on Twitter and Trapper Dive on YouTube, Instagram, all that good stuff. Right now, I'm still doing my film studies. I put out my written film studies on Hogs Haven, and then my videos are on YouTube. So we're going to continue to do that now up into the season and even through the season. So I appreciate you having me on once again.
Of course, bro. Yeah. So Jamal definitely put some good work in, some good film work. He had an awesome breakdown on wide receivers this offseason. I think Drake London was your big one that hit the most. I remember seeing a bunch of them. So really good stuff over there. That was your guy right there.
I was going to war for that guy.
Yeah. All right. And guys, I'm going to bring it on home. So thank you for everything. I'm George Carmi from Full Press Coverage. You can follow me at Twitter at GCarmi21. I'm host of the Full Press Commanders podcast and I have an article coming out about the NFC East and position groups coming up soon. So pleasure spending time with y'all. Talk to y'all later. Peace.